Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Today there's some pretty big news because it was the launch of a new group led by pilots that wants to identify and UAP and try to help remove the stigmatization that's has revolved around them for a long time. Basically, this new organization, it's called the Americans for Safe Aerospace. It's a nonprofit group, and it's led by military pilots. And according to its mission, I'll leave the website so you can check it out. According to its mission statement, it says that it's an organization dedicated to aerospace safety and national security with a focus on unidentified anomalous phenomena. ASA, which is the short for it, was founded by Ryan Graves. Of course, we all know Ryan Graves, a former Lieutenant U.S. Navy FA-18 pilot who was the first active duty pilot to come forward to Congress about UAP. Identifying domain awareness gaps is critical to U.S. national security. If UAP are foreign assets, we must respond appropriately. If UAP continue to defy conventional explanation, we must invest in scientific research. ASA supports military and commercial pilots and aerospace workers impacted by UAP, scientists committed to investigating this mystery, and concerned citizens who believe in transparent disclosure from our government. So here we have yet another organization, a nonprofit group this time, that's very interested in UAP and trying to make the skies safer and trying to determine what these objects are when they do turn up. Of course, as we all know, Ryan Graves has talked about things that he has seen. He saw objects as a Navy pilot that looked like spheres inside of cubes floating around, just flying at high speeds, at ridiculous speeds that defy logic. But anyway, there's a lot of big names that are part of this thing. For instance, the Aircrew Leadership Council, there's David Fravor is one of the people on that council. Of course, David Fravor is famous as for being one of the Tic Tac witnesses back in 2004. The advisory board has some big names on it too, including Avi Loeb and Gary Nolan and Christopher Mellon, among others. But so there's a lot of people involved in who we all know of who are interested in UFOs, scientists, former DOD officials that are interested in trying to identify what these objects are. So it's good to see that. And of course, the executive director is Ryan Graves. So this is a really neat thing to see. There's an article, I'm going to get into that in a minute. But before we do, I just want to point out, like, as we all know, I mean, how many stories over the decades have we heard from commercial pilots, from airline pilots, pilots of small planes, military pilots? They come forward and they tell their stories. And in some cases, some of them, you find out that a lot of the pilots over the decades never come forward because they're basically scared that they're going to lose their job. You know, sometimes they're threatened. I mean, how many different stories have there been where we hear about people being threatened? You know, like there'll be a pilot, an airline pilot, for instance, sees a UFO and wants to report it or tries to report it. Next thing you know, the guy finds himself in a small dark room with somebody, some ranking Pentagon official or some plainclothes government agents, or maybe even men in black, right? There's so many different cases on the record that with regard to these kinds of cases where these encounters where pilots are basically threatened or threatened that they'll lose their jobs. They're basically scared. So they can't say anything and they don't say anything. That happens a lot. A lot of pilots actually see UFOs over the years and never say anything because they know it's already ingrained in them. It's basically something, hey, never do that. Don't ever say you saw a UFO because they'll deem you a crackpot. But anyway, they'll be brought before somebody, and then you'll have some tough guy talking to them in some dark room somewhere, saying stuff like, "I understand you want to report a UFO, son. Well, let me get right to the point. You never saw a UFO. There's no such thing as flying saucers from outer space or little green men. It would be a shame if you were to go blabbing to the press about your sighting, a sighting that never really happened, because then we'd have to deem you a crackpot and take away your license. You'd be lucky to get a job scrubbing commodes at the local McDonald's. So I hope I make myself clear here, son. I really hope you don't turn out to be some crackpot. Are you catching my drift? Or am I being obtuse? Now get the hell out of here, you goddamn nut." So you hear stories like this all the time. So we know that people get threatened. They're threatened that they'll lose their jobs or they'll be called a crackpot or whatever, and then they never say anything. So it's nice to see it, along with everything that else has been going on over the last several years, since actually 6 years now, since 2017. Along with that, I mean, you have this now. You have a group of pilots that are stepping forward, that are sick of it, and want to move this forward already. They want us to get us over the hump and face reality. I'm certain that a lot of these people in this organization have already come to terms with the reality that it is extraterrestrials in a lot of cases that are behind the controls of these machines that they see out there. There's no question in my mind about that. But anyway, here's a little article about this that was on NBC News. I want to go through this article here. It says, the headline reads, as the United States government expands UFO investigations, a new group forms for pilots who spot them. And it says here, the subhead says, airline passengers are encouraged to report suspicious activity in the name of national security, but pilots have a harder time reporting UAP. And then the article, which is written by Alex Seitz Wald, says, the first active duty military pilot to come forward to Congress about his experience with so-called unexplained aerial phenomena. Well, it's actually unidentified anomalous phenomena nowadays, is starting a first of its kind nonprofit group to support other pilots who see things they can't explain. He said, airline passengers are encouraged to report suspicious activity in the name of national security, but pilots on those same planes often face professional stigma and institutional obstacles in reporting unexplained aerial phenomena or UAP. Again, it's not unexplained aerial phenomena, it's unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, that could represent national security threats in the age of drones and spy balloons, advocates say. Well, let's just stop here for a second. Yeah, in the age of drones and spy balloons, again, there was a time when there were no drones floating around, like 30 years ago, when 40 years ago, where people were seeing these kind of things, right? It wasn't like today, right, with the drones we have all over the place. So these things, it's almost like, this is the thing I'm scared of. A lot of people in the UFO community are afraid of, is that history is getting erased on this, and it's going to start somewhere around 2004 and forward, and all the other stuff that happened before that never really happened. That's what it seems like it's happening. And of course, there's always been spy balloons floating around, so that's nothing new. But anyway, continuing here, it says, for instance, the Federal Aviation Administration has no mechanism for pilots to report UAP, the term preferred to UFOs, instead directing them to civilian UFO groups that are often dismissed as the domain of cranks and conspiracy theorists. Yeah, see, that's how it's been set up. I mean, the way this whole world has been set up ever since the 50s with the Robertson panel and the Air Force stigmatizing the whole thing. We're still trying to break free of that. I think we're getting better. I think definitely the stigmatization has been reduced over the past 6 years, particularly. But regardless, there is still a concern. If you're a pilot flying an airline, passenger airline, and there's really no mechanism to go reporting UFOs, or there's nowhere after it's all said and done where you should go and report it, and they don't want you to ever go to the press. That's because, I'll tell you what, folks, over the years, the reason that these people have gotten received threats from over the years is because the military has, they basically hold the power. Someone in the Pentagon, that the secret control group holds the strings on all this. And whenever somebody steps forward who has a position of authority, like an airline pilot, and he wants to talk about UFOs, well, then somebody pushes back at the FAA's, telling, hey, you better get your guy in line there, or guess what, it's not going to be good for you or him. So that's what's the kind of stuff that's been going on over the years. Because again, the reason that they've been covering this up for all these years, of course, obviously, we could speculate on these reasons, but this is what they are. I mean, one of the reasons, of course, is because they want the time to reverse engineer it, so they want to pretend that it's not real during the time needed to try to do that, and also because there's nothing that they could do about it. How could you're a military and your toys aren't nearly as good as the toys that these extraterrestrials have? Well, you don't want to tell the world that. You want to pretend that you're on top of this, that there's nothing that could challenge you. So that's some of the reasons there. But anyway, and of course, UFO groups, I mean, are often dismissed. Don't you love that? I mean, in a mainstream media newspaper article here saying UFO groups that are often dismissed as the domain of cranks and conspiracy theorists. Doesn't that make you sick? Anyway, continuing here, it says Americans for Safe Aerospace, which is officially launching Thursday, which is today, as the first pilot-led advocacy organization dedicated to UAP, seeks to change that. Co-founded and run by former Navy pilot Ryan Graves, the group, which provided exclusive details to NBC News, aims to better support aviators who witness unexplained events. The group wants to push for policy changes like better reporting mechanisms, serve as a hub for pilot whistleblowers, and advocate for more disclosure by the military and other government agencies. That's great stuff from Ryan. I'm glad to see people like Ryan Graves. I mean, this guy's a hero right now in the UFO community. He's somebody that who's doing all the right things. When it comes to this topic. Anyway, he has a direct quote here. He says, unidentified objects in our airspace present an urgent and critical safety and national security issue, but pilots are not getting the support they need and the respect they deserve. When I served, my squadron was encountering UAP nearly every day and nothing was being done. Let me just stop there. Of course, nothing was being done because they can't do. We can't do anything, right? It's not his fault. But they would just pretend like his superiors. Don't worry about it. There's nothing there. Because there's nothing. What can we do? I mean, what can you do against a civilization that could be 1 million, if not 1 billion years more advanced than we are? Anyway, continuing. It says here, 5 other former military aviators, in addition to a commercial pilot and flight instructor, have joined the group's Aircrew Council, and its advisory board includes prominent civilian researchers like Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb, politicos like Susan McHugh, the longtime chief of staff to the late Democratic leader Harry Reid, astronaut Terry Virts, the former commander of the International Space Station, and a former head of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, retired Navy Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet. Well, there you go. There's some big names, people that had positions of power in their lives that are part of this. See, it is, regardless of how much people like me complain and other people in the UFO community complain about disclosure, things are happening. There are people pushing back. Like these people are, these people right now are heroes as far as I'm concerned. They're just saying, you know what, we're pushing forward on this. We don't care. Okay, there's definitely a control group that's sitting on this information, keeping a secret from the public, but we're going to keep pushing through here, and we don't care what anybody says anymore. We're going to take the stigma away, and also by doing so, another thing that hopefully happens out of this is that no pilot should ever be concerned again about losing his or her job because they report UFOs. Continuing with this article here, it says UAP are often conflated with aliens in the popular imagination, but earthly mysteries may be more pressing. From the undeclared drone attacks on Moscow apartment buildings this week to the recent flight of a Chinese spy balloon over sensitive U.S. military installations, which advocates say traditional U.S. aerospace defenses aren't calibrated to detect. Okay, I concede that, yes, there are concerns with drones from Moscow and Chinese spy balloons. Okay, that's a concern, but there are things out there that are extraterrestrial nature. I think that should be just as much of a concern because we have no idea what they're up to. I mean, let's be realistic here. We don't know what they're doing here. I mean, we don't know. For all we know, they're trying to take over the world. I mean, what do we really know? I mean, what should be more concerning? A spy balloon from China or an extraterrestrial civilization that's trying to take over the whole planet and maybe get rid of the human beings? We don't know. What's more concerning? All right, continuing here, it says, U.S. fighter jets shot down 2 other unidentified objects, which many people now suspect were hobbyist balloons over North American airspace in the days after the U.S. military knocked out the Chinese balloon. But the confusion and lack of information about what's happening over the United States is dangerous for pilots and passengers, Graves and others say. And here's a direct quote from Gallaudet. It says here, the establishment of Americans for Safe Aerospace is long overdue. As the chief meteorologist for the United States Navy, I dedicated my career to the safety of flight. I have seen firsthand how UAP have placed military pilots at risk, and we need to better understand them to reduce risk. And continuing here with the article, it says, Washington has begun to take UAP more seriously. The Defense Department and U.S. intelligence agencies have started releasing more information. And this week, NASA held the first public meeting of its new committee tasked with studying UAP, which said the stigma around reporting strange sightings has contributed to a lack of good data. Well, that's very true, but as we also remember during that hearing or that meeting or whatever you want to call it, we also had the boss of Arrow, Sean Kirkpatrick, make a statement that there's basically reverse stigmatization going on right now. Well, yes, because there's a lot of people out there who have brains in their heads, Sean. A lot of people out there have brains in their heads. And when we hear government officials stepping up in front of senators during a hearing and say that they have no evidence whatsoever of extraterrestrials here, right, of non-human intelligent beings here, right, we know that you're lying, and that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. Anyway, continuing here, David Spergel, one of the people from the Princeton University astrophysicist who chairs this NASA panel, said on Wednesday, one of our goals is in having NASA play a role is to remove stigma and get high quality data. Well, again, like I said during the NASA hearing, NASA meeting, the good thing is that NASA's actually holding a meeting, a public meeting about UFOs. That's great. That's definitely a step forward. Of course, to me, all of this is it's all part of this. It seems like it's part of a slower disclosure. Or again, some people have pointed out that we've seen this this kind of stuff before, but we never really had NASA holding a meeting on UFOs. That's something pretty new here. And they're going to have and they're basically studying them. They're trying to figure out better ways to try to obtain data from them and how to look at it and what to cull from it. Anyway, continuing here with this article, it says, Graves said that most pilots he knows either have seen something they can't explain or know someone who has, but that until recently, most would talk about it only in hushed tones and in private settings for fear of being mocked or jeopardizing their career growth. Most of the sightings are probably innocuous, Graves said, citing analyses that were able to explain away all but 2 to 5% of anomalous sightings, but that still represents dozens of sightings of potential new threats from China, Russia, or somewhere else. Of course, let me just stop here again. I'm so sick of hearing China and Russia, and there's things here from somewhere else. Why don't we focus on the somewhere else? I mean, let somebody else worry about the China and Russia stuff. Let somebody else talk about that. And when we're studying, how about we I thought that's what Arrow was supposed to be doing. Like, let's not talk about Chinese spy balloons and Russian drones. Let's focus on the other stuff, right? The good stuff, the stuff that we know has been being hid from us for all these decades. Let's focus on that stuff, right? That's what the people want. Again, but instead we get treated like we're a bunch of stupid idiots, Yesterday, it's almost like here, take this little. You ever see those things that they give to a baby, the pacifiers? That's what they're doing. They're trying to give us a pacifier, the shiny object, Hey, here's a little pacifier, you dummy out there. You dummies out there. Here's a little pacifier. Why don't you just suck on this for a few hours and don't worry about UFOs from outer space. Just worry about Russia and Chinese stuff coming in. Worry about that instead. That's scarier. All right, continuing here with this, it says, and the rapid proliferation of drones of all shapes and sizes has compounded the problem. Here's another direct quote. This is from David Radzkowski, NASA's former chief financial officer and chief of staff, who is on this new ASA group's advisory board. As our airspace gets more congested and more critical to our daily lives, we need to have a better understanding of what is in our sky for the safety of our pilots and the general public. Of course, there's no question that drones could potentially pose hazards. I mean, they definitely could pose hazards. Continuing here, it says, Graves said he's already in conversation with pilots interested in going public with potentially important UAP sightings with multiple witnesses, and he said more is likely to be out there. It's pretty simple, he said. We should know what's up there over our heads. Yep, that is pretty simple, isn't it? A lot of us do have a pretty good idea what it is, though, don't we? We have a pretty good idea. We've been talking about this for a very long time now, so we have a pretty good idea what's already out there. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, we are back. I just want to go over some of the recent polls I had on Spotify. I always, for every episode, every podcast that I post on Spotify, I always include a poll anymore. And I want to go over some of the more recent ones. I guess we'll start with, for the episode titled Plans Detailing Methods to Study UAP Revealed by Harvard's Galileo Project, I asked the question, will the Galileo project someday report definitive findings in favor of the extraterrestrial reality? 23 people, or 54.8%, said yes, while 19 people, or 45.2%, said no. So it was a pretty much even deal there. The yeses do have it. I guess, I probably should have thrown an I don't know in there because I really don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's heads or tails. I mean, really, when you think about it. I would probably, but I think if I were to vote, if I only was left with those two choices, I think I would probably say, well, boy, I don't know. See, I don't know. You know what? Right now, I'd say no. Maybe I'll change my mind tomorrow. Who knows? Because sometimes I do change my mind on these things. And then for the episode, Stephen Greer to reveal definitive evidence of black budget UFO operations, I asked this question: is the government and not extraterrestrials responsible for the alien abduction phenomenon? As a lot of us know out there, Stephen Greer and his acolytes proposed that that's the government behind alien abductions, and the aliens have nothing to do with that at all, and they're the good guys, which makes me wonder about all these people that have encountered aliens and have said that they were abducted. I mean, apparently these were all government black ops operations, according to Stephen Greer. I don't believe that. That would mean that that little being that I saw in my bedroom when I was a kid that only had 3 fingers on its hand was some sort of a remote control robot that was apparently operated by some man in black standing outside my house with a little remote, one of those little Tyco remote controls for remote control cars. So I don't believe that. But anyway, a lot of my followers on Spotify don't believe that either, because only 16 or 23.2% said yes, while 53 or 76.8% said no. Okay, so yeah, I don't agree with that one at all. I don't believe that. I don't think that the government is responsible for alien abductions. I think aliens are responsible for alien abductions. Okay, that's where I stand on that one. And then the next one was, I did a podcast called, and the title was 3 Flying Saucers Surround Small Plane and Nearly Crash It. And now this was about an incident that happened in 1975 to a pilot. He was named Carlos Montiel, who was flying a single engine plane, and he was suddenly found himself surrounded by 3 flying saucers. And after this incident happened, he had some men in black encounters, and he also had an encounter from some strange old man. And I thought it was a very interesting story. I think it's one of my favorite UFO stories out there. It's among my top 10 for sure. But I asked the question, who or what was the old man who visited Mexican pilot Carlos Antonio de los Santos Montiel after his incredible UFO encounter? And the biggest, most people said interdimensional being, 10 people said that, or 50%. Then the next in line was extraterrestrial, 30, which 6 people said it was extraterrestrial, or 30%. Then next in line was a government agent, which 2 people voted for, or 10%. And then a tie for the next 2 was just an old man, 1, or a guardian angel, 1, each 5%, and 0 for hallucination. Nobody thinks it was a hallucination. So that's it with that one so far. Now these polls are still ongoing, so if you want to participate, you still can. There's still some time left. And then the next poll was for the episode where I wrote on Corbell Knapp body slam debunkers with new Mojave Triangle witness testimony. I asked this question: who is your favorite personality in the UFO disclosure effort among the choices below? Now, so far, I had 7 different names here. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, 7 different names here. The bottom of the list, surprisingly, is Lou Elizondo. Out of the 56 who voted so far, there's 29 days are left here yet. Lou Elizondo has received the least amount of votes so far, only 4, which constitutes 7.1%. Then next in line was Christopher Mellon. He received 5 votes, or 8.9%. Then next in line was Dr. Gary Nolan. He received 6 votes, or 10.7%. Next in line was a tie, actually, between Jeremy Corbell and Stephen Greer. Each of them received 8 votes, or 14.3% each. Then next in line was filmmaker James Fox. He received 9 votes, or 16.1%. And top of the heap, George Knapp, 16 votes. He's dominating. He's completely dominating this poll. Everyone loves George Knapp. He's gotten 16 votes so far, or 28.6%. So George Knapp is leading the pack right now. There is 29 more days to vote, though, just so you know. So we'll come back to this one. I like this poll. This is an interesting one. Now there's certainly some names there that I didn't. You're only allowed to have 7 choices. There would have been a couple other names, but I ran out of spots. And then for the next one, the next poll that I did was now just yesterday. I did 2 different polls yesterday. NASA UAP meeting part 1, and I actually put a warning in there. I hope everyone appreciates that. I wrote right out in the title, warning, it's boring, right? Because it was boring. And I did ask, the question was regarding about how boring it really was. I asked that question, how boring was NASA's UAP public meeting? And the least amount was the least choice, the bottom of the rung choice was horrifyingly boring, which received 3 votes or 11.5%. Next up was rather watch paint dry. That received 4 votes or 15.4%. Next in line was a tie between 10 on a scale from 1 to 10 and sleep inducing. Each of those received 6 votes or 23.1% each. And finally, the biggest vote getter so far is turned it off. 7 people voted for that one so far, 26.9%. And then I actually split that up into 2 parts because they had a lunch break. It was a 4-hour event, so I decided to split it up into 2 parts. And the second podcast that I uploaded on that was NASA UAP meeting part 2, or how many government employees does it take to say nothing? And I asked a question about stigma, and I said, has the stigma associated with the UFO topic lessened since the leak of the Pentagon UAP videos in 2017? Yes or no? 44 people so far have voted, and 14 or 31.8% say no, and 30 or 68.2% say yes. And I agree with the yeses on this one for sure. I think that yes, it's definitely, the stigma has changed. The conversation is definitely different than it used to be. I mean, so of course we still have debunkers and people call them UFO believers, crackpots, and things like that. But it doesn't hurt. It doesn't sting as much as it used to. So with all of that in mind, we're still way ahead here. We're getting better. It's definitely, the stigma is getting better, and believe me, the stigma will reverse itself eventually, because at some point, the people who don't accept this reality, at some point, they're going to be viewed upon just as we view flat earthers today. I mean, there are people still right now today, believe it or not, who actually believe the earth is flat. I don't know how or why or what's the matter with these people, but there are people out there who think that. And at some day, we'll be actually saying the same thing about people who don't believe that there's an extraterrestrial presence on Earth. We'll be saying, look, we were looking at them and wow, they're a bunch of crackpots, aren't they? Those people who just can't accept it. They're nuts. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Until next time.